Welcome to No Ordinary People. I'm Jade, and I'm on a mission to give positivity a voice by sharing stories of everyday people doing extraordinary things. They're a reminder of the power we all have to make the world a better place. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which we're recording today. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening. I acknowledge that this land has always been a place of meeting, care and connection for children and families, and recognise the ongoing strength, wisdom and sovereignty of First Nations communities. I also acknowledge the deep and enduring impacts of colonisation, particularly on children and kinship systems, and on our shared responsibility to work in ways that honour culture, community and self-determination. Today's guest is Jane Rowe, OAM, the founder and CEO of the Mirabel Foundation. She's a woman whose life work has been shaped by a fierce, quiet commitment to children who are so often unseen. For more than 2 decades, Jane has stood alongside children affected by parental substance abuse. Children growing up with uncertainty, shame and silence while doing their best to survive adult realities far too early. Through Mirabel, Jane has helped build a model of care that centres long-term relationships, joy, dignity and belonging. Thank you for joining me, Jane.
Absolute pleasure.
I always love to start by getting to know you, Jane, little Jane, who you were growing up. We're both clearly fellow Brits.
We are.
Who are lucky enough to have been welcomed and flourished within this beautiful country.
Completely.
So when you think back to your early years in the UK, what do you remember most strongly about those formative years?
Well, we're going a long way back. And I would say in many ways I had an ideal childhood, or certainly, from the exterior, lived in a beautiful village, community, great kindness from my parents. It was always about compassion, never any judgment. I was spoilt materialistically, without a doubt. I was privileged. But also, we all have a story, don't we? So, my father and I think we understand our parents much more as we get older.
Yeah.
But my father had experienced extreme trauma as a child, and alcohol was his medication. So as a child, I was very aware that during the day, everything was great, and then things would shift in the evening. And he would be very, very volatile. I would be very frightened. As we know, memories are very unreliable. But if someone says to me, what was your first memory? My memory is of being about 2 years old in a cot upstairs at night and hearing my father going on a rampage and shaking the cot, calling for my mummy.
Right.
So, yet he was also incredibly compassionate, he was kind. But what I learnt, and certainly in reflection from a young age, is how childhood influences us, how helpless we feel. For many, many years, things can kind of put you back there. And shame, because we were, to all intents and purposes, the ideal family. So it's those secrets that you keep tight.
As you moved through into adolescence and early adulthood, what were the experiences that began to challenge you or sort of change the course that you were on?
I went to a very traditional English boarding school. And from a very young age, even though I'm sure it probably did me a lot of good, but I didn't enjoy it at the time, although I did make incredible friends. And I think one of the best things about it was to survive. You've got to learn to get on with everyone. And so absolutely, that was the big thing I took from there. But I wanted a different life. I wanted to rebel from a very young age. It was, I can't wait to get out of here. And I remember as a child, we would go to London very frequently, and I can still picture it. We'd be on the train as it pulled into Charing Cross. And as a young child, I'd put my head out the window and inhale all the fumes and go, I can't wait to move here.
And I know I've read your book, by the way, which I will put in the show notes, and I encourage people to read. So I'm not going to kind of cover a lot of that same ground, but I do want to talk about your first career. So like it's talking about that excitement of London and the era that you were growing up in was like pivotal for music. And can you paint me a picture of that sort of first job and being within that sort of high voltage music environment? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I left school and there was never any focus put on me to achieve or academia, anything like that. So I was sent to secretarial college, and I apparently went down in history as the only girl who left whose typing was faster than her shorthand, because I would just, every weekend I would go to Amsterdam. I was never there. And then I left with absolutely no qualifications. And one of my very dear friends said, "Oh, my cousin is working with this guy who's setting up a record company," which was, as it turned out, Richard Branson. "And they're looking for people to work, and I'll organise an interview." So I got in touch with their cousin, who organised an interview with Richard Branson, who the two questions, or the main question sort of he asked me was, what was my name and what was my birth sign? I said, I'm an Aquarian. He went, "You got the job."
What was it about an Aquarian that he just resonated with?
I think he would have given it to me regardless. And that was in the very early days when they used to run a mail order company. So people, would send in their little postal orders, order vinyl, and I would be the one typing out the labels.
I wonder if you sent one to me. I'm old enough that I used to send in. Yeah, I remember once I racked up a huge debt on my dad's credit card because I found this mail order where I could just get a record every week. So I wonder if you sent one to me.
I don't think I'm older than you, but definitely my name used to be in the Melody Maker New Musical Express. If you want a mail order, send it to Jane. Da, da, da.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And who were some of the musicians? Because that would have been just an incredible time of so innovative and, breaking down barriers. Who were some of the musicians that you spent time with?
Well, Mike Oldfield had just done Tubular Bells, and that changed the direction of Virgin.
Yeah.
So he was then, and there was Captain Beefheart. But then, of course, the ones who probably had the most influence on me was that Branson signed up the Sex Pistols.
Yeah.
So I would be typing my labels, and there would be Sid Vicious coming in, joking around. It was the start of the punk era, which was, for a young kid that had had a very traditional, strict upbringing, I was in absolute heaven. It was the start of, as you said, the music, the punk. It was a terrific era for a kid to grow up in.
Yeah. Now, fast forward to coming across to Australia. What sort of instigated that, and what was that like for you? So starting in a brand new country, I've got my own genesis story in that regard, and I think there's something great about the bravery of youth, right? I think if when you're going to move to a brand new country, I think there's no better time to do it than when you're in your early 20s, because you've just got this, I suppose, just give it a go mentality. So what was the spark for you? Why Australia?
A bloke, that old chestnut. So I met an Australian. I was working in Italy in the mountains for a little bit, which was as much to get out of London because I was managing to get myself into quite a bit of trouble. So I was working there, met an Australian, and he said, "Oh, you should come back to Australia." And I was like, I don't know. I want to go to South America. But then ended up you could get really cheap air tickets then. And my father was very much, no, just get her away. She needs to get away. So I came really with not much more than an overnight bag, one-way ticket, no idea of consequence. I mean, isn't that the most beautiful thing about youth? You
Absolutely.
do things because you're not... It's a good idea at the time. And it was a good idea. I mean, in many ways, it totally saved my life.
Yeah.
But it was also They had a sheep station in the Western District, so flew in not really knowing what to expect. His brother picked us up. I remember driving there. I mean, one minute I was in the heart of New King's Road, punk London, and suddenly I'm here and it's like, whoa, where
Not in
am I?
Kansas anymore.
No, that's right. But it was exciting. It was new. It was different. His family were so welcoming. It was an adventure. I didn't think, well, this is where I am forever now. It was like, well, this is something different. So.
And then how did you then transition into being a counsellor? So in the late 1990s, you know, and what were those early experiences? So I'm interested in how you moved into that era.
Yep.
Into that area. And then, you know, what was that first experience for you in counselling?
So I ended up in counselling. So I got married, had 2 young children, and the marriage sadly broke up. And I thought, oh, I've got to work. I'm not qualified for anything. It just hadn't dawned on me that I would suddenly have to be a sole breadwinner. And I thought, I knew I could never work in an office and I love people. I thought the only thing I'm qualified to do is counselling and addiction, because that's what had happened to me in London. I was incredibly fortunate. I had a great safety net. I was one of the fortunate people that survived it and got out of it. But I thought, that's the only thing I am qualified to do and that I understand. And that was why I chose that career. And I initially signed up as a volunteer at Windana, which is still going strong. And they did a lot of training. And about halfway through that training, the trainer and CEO said, we think this is what you should be doing. And we will employ you and pay for your study and pay for your training. So again, I hadn't really thought about it. It just happened and I fell into it. So that was how it started. And, you know, from that, I was doing quite a few. I was working in their rehab farm. I was doing assessments. I was doing one-to-one counselling, groups. And I was learning as much as the residents were learning. And I still learn, you know. I'm learning the whole time about human behaviour. But I always felt very comfortable because I understood addiction.
Yeah, that's that lived experience, right?
Yes.
And let's have a look at because obviously that was supporting the adults in that situation, so their own journey, their own recovery journey. What was it that drew your attention to the children of those adults? Was there a particular moment or an instance that you can explain?
Yes, a very significant moment. So my job at that time was I was doing the assessment. So people were on waiting lists. There were no beds. I mean, there's still such inadequacy for people that want help with it, you know, addiction. You know, if you say you want help, you need it now.
Yeah.
Don't be told, come back in 8 months.
The moment could be gone.
People die. So every week people would come in and see me. Where are we on the waiting list, Jane? I go, I'm so sorry, there's still not a bed for you. And one particular day, 4 people who, you know, I'd got to know pretty well came in. I said, I'm so sorry, it's still weeks away. And they said, well, we're done with this. We're going to go out and get stoned tonight. And I said, well, I can't stop you doing that. But if you do end up doing that, you've got to stay together as a group, because there's very strong heroin out there and people are overdosing every day. And the ones that are overdosing are the ones that are using in isolation. They all went out that night, scored heroin, all passed out. 2 woke up and 2 didn't. And the 2 young women who died had children. And I remember going into work the next morning and being told, and, you know, firstly, I felt redundant in my role. Like, you know, what can we do when, you know, people need help and we can't provide it? And I went to the funeral of one of the young mums because she came from a very fragmented family and she had a beautiful little 6-year-old son. And, she loved her child. He loved her. Sometimes love isn't enough, but, she really tried her best. And I was at the funeral, and her little son was sitting with emergency workers. Her biological family didn't even know he existed. They'd had nothing to do with her for years. So this little boy was sitting with a worker on either side of him. As they lowered Mum's coffin, he jumped up and ran towards it crying, going, "Where are you putting my mummy?" And he was escorted out. And his future would have been, he would have been moved from home to home until a permanent home could be found. He'd lost all sense of love, belonging, and without a doubt, later in life, would, self-harm, attempt suicide, use drugs to push all that trauma away. So it was that moment where I thought, no one ever talks about the children. We have this sort of complete stereotype of who an addict looks like, what they are. No one reports on it. They'll talk about the heroin fatalities. They never report about how many children are now without parents. So I went home that night and I picked up the phone. Because of my music background in the UK, I knew a lot of musicians here. And it was a small idea. I rang them up and I said, can we do a benefit concert? Just for the kids I know that have lost their mum or dad this year, just to buy a Christmas present for them. And within 48 hours, we had a 2-night who's who of Australian rock and roll. Because it wasn't about the musicians going, I've got my life together, or it wasn't making any judgment on addiction. It was about, this is for the children who no one thinks about. And if we don't get in there early, their future looks really bleak.
And what felt important to you to get right for those children? So what I love about Mirabel is the dignity and the non-stigmatizing approach that you have, because I think, as you know, even today, there is still shame that surrounds those beautiful, precious children that have lost their safety, their anchor, their belonging. What felt important to get right in that moment?
It was about, it's exactly what you say, the shame, blame, secrets. It was about that every child would know Mum loved you very much, Dad loved you very much, and that you are not to blame. Because in the early days of Mirabel, when I would go to, the families, because generally it's grandmothers or family that will take the children on, and, the little children, they'd say to me, I should have taken better care of Mummy. It was my fault. Because often it's a child that finds Mum or Dad overdosed on the sofa. So, and I think even, children of divorced parents often go, it's my fault. What could I have done? So that was one of the key things for me, that children didn't inherit the blame.
Yeah. They
knew that they were absolutely loved by Mum and Dad. Didn't mean Mum and Dad didn't make mistakes because, addiction, they weren't well, but it wasn't about them. And that they are worthy. They are worthy people and they can have a future, and that there is always hope. Belonging. I think belonging is such globally.
Yeah.
I think belonging, that the amount of disconnect, I think in a simplistic way, is a lot of the world problems we have. We all need connection and belonging. It's an absolute fundamental need.
Could not agree more.
So that was the other thing, was I wanted the children to really have a strong sense of belonging.
And talk me through those early days. So, you were a person who was impacted personally in terms of, you saw the impact on that young child and you went, I have the power to do something about it, so I'm going to reach out to my friends. From that first benefit, let's call it sort of a benefit concert, from that, how did Mirabel form? What were the early programs? Where did you start?
We started with support groups for the kinship carers, grandparents.
Yeah.
And we started with a very small taking kids for days out camps. So it was that combination. It was a very small team. 2 of those team members are still with me today.
Love that.
Which is so great. So I've always wanted to do whatever we do well, not get big just for the sake of getting big. So, okay, what have we got the resources for? We can run support groups and we can take kids away. And I was really fortunate in as much as the Triple J Real Appeal heard about us. So they really got our message out and we raised money, which is why we could initially start doing these little programs. And then 60 Minutes did a thing on a piece on us with Jeff McMullen, who's a beautiful, empathetic man. And that someone in government saw that. And I mean, we're talking a long time ago. This would never happen now. But they got in touch with me and they came and met in my kitchen because I was running Mirabel from home for the first year.
Yeah.
And still doing counselling at Windana. And they came and met with me and Nicole, who you know, who's worked with me for decades in my kitchen. They loved what we were trying to do. And they said, we absolutely believe that you are going to establish this. And in good faith, we are going to give you some funding. And it was done with a handshake over my kitchen table. So it was just those things that allowed us, okay, now we can do that. And then, one would meet. There are so many wonderful philanthropists. I still believe there are so many more good people around than bad. And you meet a philanthropist and then I never sort of got up and thought, we've got to grow, we've got to get bigger. It was all very, very organic. And as it happened, it was like, okay, now we can actually do this. And we've always spoken a lot to, other organizations in the sector and families. We never wanted to duplicate what anyone else was doing. What's the point? Let's work together.
Absolutely.
So we would identify the gap and go, okay, this is what we need to prioritize now. With this bit of money we've got, we will start doing this. And so it grew from that very, very small idea to, where we are now throughout, Victoria and New South Wales.
I want to come back to something you said a bit earlier around the fact that, the majority, when these children lose a parent, quite often it is a grandparent that steps in and quite often it's the nan.
Yes.
I remember watching, I was at one of your events and I watched a video with a gran and my heart ripped open because anyone listening, just put yourself into this mindset. You've just lost someone extremely important to you, your child. And then your grandchild, you're now having to go back into parenting, something that you were never prepared for. You were in the role of grandparent and loving that stage in your life, no doubt. And now you have to go back and go back to those early years and give a sense of safety, hope, and help that young person. And you're grieving yourself. How does the Mirabel program support those grandparents? What does that sense of community look like? Because I know that's a very big part of the work that you do.
Yes, well, I think it's about connection and bursting the secret, the shame, and the fear.
Yeah. Because
the fear the grandparents have, my grandchild repeat that behaviour and their life changes unbelievably. Their idea of retirement or socialising, gone.
Yeah.
And the reason we work with family is because they get minimal, if any, government support. And that's what we established when setting Mirabel up. If we can't be everything to everyone. So because without a doubt, if when appropriate, if you can keep a child within family, it is so much better.
Yeah.
The outcomes are so much better. So for the grandparents, it's about meeting other grandparents or aunts and uncles, and we do that, in support groups. And for them to go, not even my neighbour knows how my daughter died. They think she died in a car accident. So for them to meet, and it's the same in anything, is it? When you meet someone that's walked the same in the same shoes, so they solve a lot of each other's problems or support each other. So it's bringing them together as much as we can, and friendships form, and reducing isolation because they become so isolated. And then we can do a lot of the referral. We will find out what they need and we'll do the legwork. Well, we think you're eligible for this, or there's a great community centre here. So it's about linking them into what they need, whether it's material aid or, community, if it's something for the kids. So we can do all of that legwork and some of the bureaucracy for them. And they can ring us. So just being able to talk to someone and get it off your chest. And we don't always have the answers. You can't always make it great, but we can understand.
Yeah.
And I think that for them, and, and be kind. Kindness, God, it's the most underestimated trait, isn't it?
And it's not hard, is it?
It's not hard.
It's not hard. I think we've lost track. Yeah.
Yeah. General, kindness and respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something we can guarantee will always give.
Yeah. In terms of that first interaction with Mirabel, so somebody sadly passes away, what does that process look like? So are you notified and then you take the step in, or do they get referred? Like, what does that first interaction with Mirabel look like?
They come to us
They
because
come
we're
to
voluntary.
you. Yeah.
And they will hear about us, whether it's through Centrelink, whether it's through a school or a counsellor or other people in the sector. They'll go give Mirabel a call.
Yeah.
And the minute they make that call, that's it.
You get into action.
Oh, yeah. And often, the first phone call can go on for 2 hours.
Yeah. Because you've walked that path alongside many people, and you know all of the barriers in the system.
Yeah.
You know all of the different services that you can link into. Your point, not replicating, complementing, which I love.
Yep.
And then for the first, I want to talk about the joy of what you bring to these kids, because I've had the privilege of attending one of your big days out with these beautiful, beautiful children, and seen how you create that wonderful space where these children look around the room and realize that they are among peers, and what that does for those kids. So can we talk about those days out? Maybe one that sticks in your mind, or, what are you trying to give those children in that day?
It's about them feeling it's not just me.
Yeah.
And with those days, which is often, and we do longer camps and different activities, but the first, connection with Mirabel will be exactly what you've said, the big day out.
Yeah.
So they come to this big day out not really knowing what it is, a little bit tentative. And then the day started, generally with little things, get all the kids together, and then it might be, put up your hand if you don't live with mum or dad. And, they're very nervous and they look around the room and then they realise
everyone's got their hand up.
Everyone's got their hand up.
Yeah.
And then childhood is precious, as we know. So it's about them experiencing that, even if it's only for a day, half a day, but those positive memories, trying to put some positive memories into their childhood. And after, that first experience, their grandparents will often ring us the next day and go, he came back a different child. He was in the car and he said, Nan, you won't believe it. Everyone there is the same as me. And that's the starting point. Burst the secret.
Yeah.
And the shame.
Absolutely. Because I think in that school environment, they may not disclose because they don't, kids don't want to stand out as in any kind of negative way, or what's perceived as a negative way. So I just love that reframes their identity. They're not alone. And again, it comes back to belonging. This is a group of people that I belong with, that, I'm not the only one feeling like this, and I'm not the only one living with my auntie or my nan or in care. So I think there's just something beautifully bonding about that. So it may, I often look at it and go, if somebody doesn't dig beneath the surface, you go, okay, you're taking the kids for a day out. it is not about the day out. The
No.
day out is the vehicle, right, in order to shift
Totally.
that stigma. And I was chatting to Nicole yesterday, actually, or no, the day before, and we were talking about, it's now proven by data that, if for every 7 positive life moments, that is what it takes to counteract severe trauma in children. And we were talking about the fact that at Mirabel, yes, there's the big days out, but there are multiple other instances through the counselling or the group work or whatever those, sessions may be, where your Mirabel kids are having those 7 life affirming, beautiful moments within 1 year of your program.
Yes.
Let alone how long those kids are within the Mirabel family. So I just want to say a massive kudos to you for something so simple. This is a thing. I think everyone goes, making a difference for these kids. It's huge. It's complex. We can't do it. You've just got to start with simple.
It's so true.
Yeah.
It's the most basic, simple, because we need that foundation to grow. We need it as adults as well, but you need that belonging, connection, and that's what because I think without that, there's nothing to build on.
Yeah.
You can have the best therapy in the world, but if you haven't got those basics down, you've got nothing to build on. So that's what we're trying to do. They're very, very simple things.
Yeah. And when it works, so what sort of shifts do you see in the children over time? Is that, without naming names, is there anything that sort of springs to mind? Are there any young people that, you've obviously done this for a number of years, and you would have seen these young people, these children go on to become, thriving adults. Are there any stories that really stand out where somebody, a child was having a really hard time and you've seen them blossom?
Yeah, oh God, I've got so many. And little things too, a young, child will get in touch with one of the team and go, I've been invited to my first birthday party, because normally they've been ostracised at school. And again, that's a shame. You can't say how mum does. So those little things are so powerful for that child. And I always think the simplest things speak the loudest. So I've got a couple of favourite stories. One, we do a girls group for both primary and secondary age kids. So with one of these girls groups, and this was a few years ago, and a beautiful young girl, and mum had died and dad was in prison. She was living with her auntie, and all her memories were just domestic violence. But she sort of fantasized about dad coming out of prison and everything was going to be wonderful. And she was at this group and dad was coming out the next day. And she was so excited and she thought everything was going to be wonderful. Dad was on his way, left prison, on his way to see her, decided he'd have one hit and died. Didn't even make it. And he had a few of his possessions in a little box that he'd had in prison, and that eventually got delivered to her. And she said to one of my team at the group, I've got it at home. Will you come so I can and be next to me while I open it? And the Mirabel person said, yeah, of course I will. So they went back home and she had this little box and she opened it, and in the box was a poetry book, and written in it was the dad had written to her mum, and it was, to my darling, whatever, I cannot believe that we're going to have a baby. I am so excited. I love you so much. And this young girl read it and she started crying. And the Mirabel person put their arm around to comfort her and she said, no, they're tears of happiness because now I know I was loved.
Oh, God.
But what a huge,
Yeah.
in her, and also Dad did really love Mum. Yeah, my memories are all of, but they did love each other.
Yeah.
And they were so happy that they were going to have me. So she realised that she had come from a place of love.
Oh, that is, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And it just shows, I mean, even as adults, right, we cling on to those positive affirmations. That's, when times are tough, you need to be able to draw on those things and how you value yourself and how others see you.
Yeah.
And for her to be able to see that right from the very beginning, she was wanted, she was loved. And yes, this has happened, but she can always hold that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
it changed everything. And another, just a little one, which is a bit different. But again, the simple thing is a beautiful young woman I worked with. You may even have met her because she's done speaking on behalf of Mirabel. But she had a really tough childhood, a lot of violence. And she was raised by her nan, who she adored. And her nan died quite young, which she always put down was due to the stress that her mum had caused. And she had so much anger and really, really couldn't move on from the anger she felt towards her mother. And then when she hit adolescence and teenager, she experienced depression, and we absolutely supported her through that. And then I met her. She was actually, which was absolutely wonderful. She ended up working for a big travel agency and was working in London for a while. She was now about 22. And I was in London and we met up for dinner. And she said to me, Jane, I've been thinking a lot and I realise now that Mum was just depressed and they never spoke about it then.
No.
And she self-medicated. And I got depression, but I was so supported. But I've absolutely realised now that Mum had no one, did her best. That's why she became addicted. And I so understand that now. And I totally forgive her. And I'm not angry at all.
Oh, that's so healing.
And how healing is that?
Absolutely.
And it's a little thing, I think. It's about the long term. A lot of the Mirabel young people say that Mirabel's a constant throughout their life. We're not there to say, this is the way to do it, this is the way you must think. It's to gently help them facilitate getting to their own resolution.
And I think what's really important there, because I know this about your work, is it's the long term and it's the consistent, right? So often, programs, at Unlimited, we're very focused on that early intervention and the majority of the charities, all of the charities that we work with, they're there for as long as the young person needs. It's not a case of, here's a program, tick the box, we're fixed. Right. It doesn't work. We know that doesn't work because recovery isn't linear and growth isn't linear,
and
right?
Problems come and go.
Correct. Life is messy. Situations arise that can trigger people, and you are there for the ups and downs, and for often, multiple generations. You probably end up, I'd say now, I think even talking to Jules, you're now supporting kids that are kids of people who went through the Mirabel program
exactly
when they were children, right? Which I think is just a beautiful, beautiful link. But why is early intervention, prevention and long-term support, why is that so critical? And why should we put more focus on that in society?
Oh, yeah. I mean, don't wait for the horse to bolt. It's madness. Don't put a Band-Aid on. Let's look at the cause. And without a doubt, the earlier you can get in, particularly with young children, the more you can bring about change. I think, in a kind of a, if you look at a child that has had, a horrific childhood, and then they actually have a very perhaps stable adulthood, that trauma is always there.
Yeah.
Whereas if you have someone who comes from a very loving sense of belonging background and their life perhaps becomes very traumatic later, they actually are more resilient because it's that very, very early development that is so critical. And if you get in early, you can prevent whatever it is, the self-labeling, the trauma. It's just intervention. Even with addiction, don't wait till someone is 10 years in or whatever. Get in there, don't judge, start asking why.
Yeah.
And working with them. But I think so often people get left till they're homeless, poverty, traumatized, repeat cycles, because that's what we do if we don't know any different. And then it's like, well, we're going to stop throwing money at that because it's hopeless. No, it's not hopeless.
I think, look, as a society, right, and this is what I find really fascinating with all of our charities, and sometimes the struggle getting government funding or the right funding at the right times. I often just get stuck on this contradiction that we seem to understand in a health capacity that prevention is better than cure. Like, we get that,
Yep.
right? We go to the gym, keep your cholesterol down, like,
Yes.
don't have too much junk food, like, be active. Like, we get that and we fund that. But we don't seem to do that when it's a more nuanced or complex issue. We seem to wait until we're at the worst case scenario, and then we try and fix it. I'm fascinated. Do you have an opinion on why we're like that? Like, why is that the case?
Well, whether it's, funds being put where they shouldn't be put, money being misspent, I don't really know why it happens. But I think for a lot of the community, they feel overwhelmed by it. And we're not told individually enough, no, you can make a difference.
Yeah.
I think, particularly look at the world today. It's overwhelming, so people shy away from it. But I think if we realise we can all make a difference, one little gesture can change the trajectory. It's not, that's why I think people are overwhelmed, shy away from it and go, the problem's too big.
Yeah, completely agree.
Whereas if we bring it back, and that's what we were saying earlier, even an act of kindness can actually change something. We don't all have to be, giving money. Our behaviour can change how people feel about themselves.
Absolutely. And just not making assumptions. And if you, I think, and this has come up in quite a few of my episodes, which I love because it reinforces, why I'm doing this. Because I firmly believe that if we, especially at a time like now, if we do get sucked into the overwhelm, then we are just not showing up in humanity how we could. And we do not all need to be absolute change makers, but you can change one person's life in a very, very finite, small amount of time with an act of kindness. I was talking to Bronwyn from the Pajama Foundation actually earlier this week, and that'll be another one of the episodes.
That's terrific.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. I know that you guys, and again, that's that complementary thing. I know that you guys, obviously are quite connected in your work. And she was talking about, her sort of her founding moment and the fact that there was this young girl in her school who didn't get invited to the school party, and so she made sure her daughter invited her, and that was just that beautiful. Really. And you've mentioned the same thing happening that you've seen, where from the Mirabel kid actually being invited to their first party. Every single parent listening to this, that's what you look out
Absolutely.
for. Who's the child who isn't being invited? Why aren't they being invited? And don't even look at the why. Just go, they should be invited.
Acceptance.
Acceptance, no judgment.
And don't
assume. You don't know.
Right. The judgment. Often say because our children inherit our values and opinions, and I think if a Mirabel child, if you can imagine, they've lost their family, they've had to move, they're now being raised by a grandparent, they're going to a different school, they don't know anyone, and they all dread that question, why are you with your nan? Or how did mum die? And they come up with the most unbelievable answers to avoid the truth. Wouldn't it be amazing if a child could hold their head up and just go, my mum died from an overdose, they loved me very much, but made bad choices. That would change the trajectory of their schooling and everything, but they can't, so they have to start by fibbing, lying, because they know they won't get asked to a friend's house if they know what. So we can all do that. We can make our children.
Has it got better over the years or worse?
I don't think it's changed that much.
You don't think it's changed?
I mean, maybe a little bit. I mean, the drug culture's definitely changed a lot. But no, I think, well, we know, judgment comes from fear, doesn't it? A lot too. So people are still very fearful if they hear the word drugs or addiction. They're not able to separate, well, that child doesn't have a drug problem, that child doesn't have an addiction problem, but I think there's a lot of fear in that.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think about the community that surrounds the child, right? So how important when these really sad instances happen where a child has lost a parent, how important is it, and how do you instigate, that community getting around the child and the carer, and what shifts do you see the minute that happens?
Well, there's a huge shift. You can see everyone breathing a bit easier. It's acceptance. For the grandparents, we go, oh, it's such a relief. They know, and they were so understanding. And I think for children, a classic example would be a traumatized child, will start a new school and, be sent out of class every day because they can't concentrate. And when we're able to talk to the teachers there and go, this is coming from that, because no child actually wakes up going, I want to be really naughty and do this. But that's a coping thing.
Yeah.
So once the teachers know the background, they can totally accommodate that. So if the grandparent has confidence that the school can know the truth, and, it's that whole ripple effect. If everyone in that child's community understands the whys of the behaviour, then it changes.
Yeah, instead of looking at the behaviour itself, ask what has happened, what is caused, and what are you trying to say? Yeah. Because in that behaviour, they are trying to say something, and it's not, I'm being naughty.
That's right.
It's, I am really struggling right now. Yep. And this environment is not bringing out the best in me.
Yeah. And, with our education programme, because some of the kids aren't ready to join mainstream school. They're not even at a point yet to have, standard tutoring. We have amazing, which, we pay for, but bring in amazing trauma-informed therapists.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. And, the progress that's made, we have seen countless children through that. And then they do other tutoring. We have a Mirabel online learning club. They do that. And then they're at mainstream school. I mean, how amazing. Because the other thing is education's critical. Emotionally, you need that belonging, connection, community. But you need an education.
And it's even like I've done a lot of reading in, the power of words and the power of language. And if we don't give kids the vocabulary to be able to express what they're feeling, then they can't let those wounds heal. They can't get those emotions out. So that in the importance of being able to give them the tools with which to express what they're feeling. Now, I know another one of our charities I've spoken to, Margot from Kids Express. Yeah. Trauma-informed, creative play therapy. So many kids don't have the words. No. But they have they have creative modalities that they can use to express that. So I love that link that you're talking about there. And I think that also harks back to your creativity and your music background. And, I can imagine music was a solace for you going through some of those hard times. I think we can all relate that sometimes words aren't enough.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally.
So we'll talk a little bit about the amazing youth workers that come and interact with these precious children. Who are they? How do you find them? What makes a great youth worker? Like, what are you looking for in your team?
Well, all the sort of qualifications and academics you can teach people. They learn. What I think our team have is a gift. They have kindness. They have compassion. And you can't teach that. And they are incredible. They can make a child feel like they're the only child in the room.
Yeah.
That is a gift to be able to do that. And it's a certain energy. And that's what I think my incredible team have. And they will learn and they become, incredibly experienced and qualified, but they have that initial gift and commitment, that belief that we can make a difference here.
I'm really interested, you've been doing this for a minute. as have I. We've been around for a minute. Yeah. What does the future look like for you? Now, what is the pathway to future Jane? What do you hope the legacy of your incredible work will leave for this foundation? What do you want to see? What do you want to see, Mirabel? I know it's not about growth for you. It's about depth and impact.
Look, I would just love, that children are able to talk about what happened to them. I would love to see that shame is lifted, prejudice is lifted. That's what I hope for the future of Mirabel Kids. As far as the future of Mirabel itself, I'm surrounded by amazing people, and I'm certainly, not looking at, moving on or doing anything right now. But when the time comes, pass the baton, it will be in amazing hands. Times change, things might be done differently, but I don't have an ounce of worry about that. I know that our values are so kind of in concrete, and our commitment that it will absolutely go on, and it's sort of bittersweet. You think, wouldn't it be great if there wasn't a need for Mirabel?
Yes. Yeah.
And it's the big picture again, it's like what you said, there's health, there's this, there's that. While there's hopelessness, whilst there's addiction, while things remain to be illegal, of course it's going to continue.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the time addiction is about pushing down our inner angst or hopelessness or fear.
Yeah, self-coping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that will continue, and particularly whilst there's still shame around that. So sadly, I think Mirabel's got its work cut out for a long time, but maybe by talking, like we are now, children will be able to talk more about it. People will think, oh yeah, I'd never thought about the kids. Oh yeah, of course the kids don't take drugs themselves. Of course they're not. That's what we want to do, isn't it? Change the conversation a little bit.
Absolutely. And I think, the power in the kids being able to talk about it is they're way less likely to end up.
100%.
And, again, it's that logical step of going, if they don't have the ability to talk about it and they feel that shame, then they're going to have to, self-medicate to cope with those feelings. There is nothing more corrosive than shame and disgust.
Just the cycles, repeat.
Correct. So as a society, I always love to go, what are some simple things that people listening can do? And I think, I'll open that up for you, but I'll probably say one that's from my perspective. But I think, obviously I'm in the industry of advertising and marketing. And I think we as an industry have an amazing opportunity to influence hearts and minds and to say the things that need to be said. And I think, more stories, more storytelling with lived experience that is destigmatizing some of these issues, more bravery in showing people what real empathy and understanding looks like. What can everyday people do in their community if they know a family affected by these tragic circumstances? What can people do?
Be kind. Smile at them. You don't need to barge in, but slowly, even a smile can kind of say, I see you, I accept. I just think it's kindness.
Yeah.
In so many different ways, and connection. It's like if you see someone homeless, you might not have any money to give them.
But you can still give them your eye contact.
You can give them your eye contact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much disconnection on so many levels that we can all do that. Just connect. You don't have to be there for half an hour, but just be kind.
Yeah.
And don't judge or jump to conclusions, because no one chooses to be homeless. No one chooses to have an addiction. What is it that has got them there?
Yeah.
And I think kindness is the most critical first step.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things I just want to talk a little bit about, from a business point of view, one of the commitments that you make, which is, I think, is a very big promise, and it's one of the things I love, is to never turn a child away, like never. And obviously you've got capacity, you've got resources, there's many things, back to your time working as a counsellor, and you've only got so many beds, right? Well, in your organisation, you've only got so many staff, so many hours, so many programs. What has it asked of you and the organisation over the years to hold that promise?
Well, it's something we just refuse to waver on. And we go back to the drawing board a lot. We've learned to do things more cost effectively if we need to. We can look at doing things where we can accommodate more people in one particular setting. And actually, who would have thought, with COVID, the one great thing that came out of it was online and Zoom. So we can use a lot of that, particularly with grandparents. What we realise now is that actually the best time, rather than driving to come to our groups, they're available with a cup of tea when they got the kids to bed. So we do evening ones.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things we do to become more time effective, cost effective. And we're very mindful of the resources we have, and we will never start a program unless we feel we've got at least 3 years commitment to run it, because we're working with kids that have got so many abandonment issues. So we're not going to start something that we go, let's hope we can keep this going. Do what we do really well and be solid with it. So we just manage. And I think we manage well. I don't think the quality of our services have been compromised in any way whatsoever. But it is, if a child or family needs help and they're ringing, you don't go, oh yeah, well, I'll get back to you when there's room. People need to be heard there and then. And nothing will change us from that core belief.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and I think, that sets the bar so beautifully high. And so it should, because that's the dignity and that's what these kids and the carers deserve.
Yeah.
I might just wrap with a little reflection, because what I love about your journey coming from the UK over to here is the fact that you basically just tried things, and there was no plan, there was no career kind of aspirations. You basically kind of followed your heart, and then you found your place, you found your purpose. So I think that for me is just such a beautiful example to give to our young listeners, right? So I was talking to my beautiful 18-year-old nephew who's living with me at the moment, and I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning him, but he was talking to me about, he's 18 and he feels like he should have a career, and he's behind the 8 ball, and he needs to decide what he wants to do. And, I was having that conversation going, you're 18. This is where you try things on. This is where you try things, and you might not like that, but you might like this, and trust that your pathway will unfold through experience. So I think if you were talking to, young Jane today, when you didn't, you're not running this organization, you're right at the beginning of your young adulthood, what would your reflections be? How do you reflect back on that journey? And is there anything you would have done different, or would you do it all the same?
No, I think I needed to do it all the same to be where I am now. I can look back certain things and think, with a bit of maturity, I would have handled that differently.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my life's kind of done a full circle, and without those mistakes, it wouldn't have happened. But are there things that I regret? Yeah. Are there things that I would change? No.
I completely agree. I think the the moments of hardship sometimes, that's where we learn the deep lessons. And I think I look back at my own life and kind of go, there are lessons I could have learned easier.
Yep.
There are definitely some, but would I change it? Hell no, because I wouldn't be sat here. I wouldn't be doing the work I'm doing. I wouldn't have the husband I've got. You don't. So I think it's you've got to almost, you've got to, as you go through them, it's really hard because you don't have that perspective. It can feel really heavy. But when you're able to, when you get a bit older in life, you're able to look back and go, actually, I wouldn't change a thing.
No, it's your resume.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, with your nephew, what I always said to my kids, and I say to young people, at that young age, it's really important, or it's more important to know what you don't want to do than knowing what you do.
Yeah.
And I think that gives us a clear direction.
Absolutely. And how are you going to show up in the world?
Yep.
And the most important, the reason that I'm so proud of him, he's kind.
That's right.
He cares.
Yeah.
He's got a beautiful heart. That's what we want for all of the children and young people in our lives,
Just be a good human being.
Just be a good human.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Completely.
Well, we might end there, Jane, because that feels like a nice place to end. As always, I will put the links to Mirabel Foundation and the incredible work that you and the team do. I just want to say on behalf of all the families, and, it's not my place to do it, but I know that they would want to say a huge thank you for making that first step, for giving a shit, for showing up, and for continuing to fight for these beautiful, beautiful children and carers. It's an absolute honor to have you here. I am, just so thankful that we could make the time today. And we'll leave it there, I think. We're out.
Thanks, Jade. Pleasure and a privilege, always.
Thank you, darling.
Need more light in your feed? Follow and share. Be part of the movement to bring the balance back.